All right. Um, this video is about intro to energy. I've already done the video about energy and ethics, and now this is mostly for the layman. You know, this is someone who has never even dipped their toe into the gigantic pond that is the etheric levels, the astral plane, energy work, being able to see energy, dealing with energy, and beings that are not necessarily corporeal. This is, I see so many people that make posts, and I think, oh my God, like, you know, you sound like you have a psychosis. You do not sound like you're all right in the head. And mostly, you know, people are making these posts because they're feeling brave and they're in panic and they really want the help and they really want the attention, whichever way that they're coming from. You know, whatever subject that they're looking to feed into, whether it's fear or camaraderie or attention, or they're just generally curious and they're looking for the information. Mostly I get approached by people that are like, I saw something really scary in my hallway and it scared the crud out of me and I couldn't move. You know, these little things. This is my intro to things that scared you and you didn't know where they came from. And everybody's experience is going to be different, so this is going to be a long video about possibilities and how broad the field is and what people perceive based on what they know and what they don't know. I get a lot of people that are like, oh, you know, I'm possessed by demons, or like something's attacking me and I don't know what it is and I can't see it because it's black, and they're seeing it with their physical eyes. And there's so many reasons why things can be black. We talk a lot about, I hear a lot of things about black shadow people and figures. And I mean, there's so many things, you know, sleep paralysis can go on. You know, if you're even in bed at all, your eyes play tricks on you. And that's one part of it. And then there's so much more, depending on where you see things, and when, and why, and has this been happening since you were 8? You know, you know, is this something that is ongoing, or did it stop and start? How old were you when it stopped? How old were you when it started again? There's so many things that go into this, and I feel like I'm barely touching on any of it. The other day, someone approached me and they were talking about seeing this entity, and I said, okay, how long have you been seeing this thing? And they said, you know, I don't know, you know, it's been a couple of years, 2 or 3. And I said, well, tell me about it and describe it to me. And they're describing, and all of a sudden there's, you know, 4 or 5 of them connected to this one entity. And I'm like, do they move independently? Have you ever seen them individually? You know, are they independent from the original? I don't know what you want to call it. I mean, I would consider this possibly an affliction. When you have things attached to you and you don't want them attached to you, I would consider that affliction. But it can be a projection as well, from somewhere, or just energy that you have pent up, emotional feelings. I believe it's Judean archetype. And the more psychic you are, the more that really does start to project outside of your body. It's a part of you. You're never getting rid of it. So that's one issue that is a possibility out of, like, what? Hundreds. You know, you could have had a mishap with a Ouija board. You could have had an emotional event where your natural shields were down. You could have someone in your life that's constantly bashing your shields. And everybody has shields naturally. But if you're more learned in the subject, then you have built up extra on top of that, um, because of events and because you can do it on purpose. Um, everybody has traumatic events in their life where things happen. We have a world that we see that involves certain beings, animals, humans versus animals. And when we see an animal, we instantaneously categorize it based on, is this thing a threat to me? Chipmunks, you're like, oh, it's so cute. And then tigers, you're like, wow, that's really pretty, but it could eat me. When you see a barracuda in the water and it's watching you, your blood runs cold. There are things that your body does to tell you whether things are okay or not when they're in your vicinity. But there's an entire world out there that you can't really see with your naked eye. I would consider that there are beings, or quote, animals, that you cannot see. My mother very fondly regards most thing in her house as the roommates that are there only part of the time. We don't really bump heads. I mean, she'll bump things in the hallway and she'll say, oh, excuse me. And, she'll walk around and she'll go back to whatever she was doing. Um, you know, I was brought up with realizing that there were things that weren't necessarily visible and weren't there all the time, but you still need to coexist. And I mean, there is a certain amount of communication you can have at that point. You can say, hey, don't cross this line. This is my personal space. Get out. I don't bother you in your personal space. Like people who have, entity issues or think that they have entity issues, you really need to take a good look at what you've done, what you might or may not be responsible for, and how this happened to you. It could be the place you're living in, the people that you are living with. If you have a really toxic person in your life that is constantly nitpicking at you, this is already corroding your shields. You already have a compromised barrier with that person, and possibly with other people, the more, extensive it gets. And that can lead you into problems all on its own. So learning a little bit of energy manipulation, learning how to create your own shield, learning how to make, the classic ball, learning meditation techniques, things like learning how to see energy and the human aura, and understand that there are levels to that, is all very important, especially when you're starting to have those kinds of issues. Most people, if you're Catholic or you're, in any part of Catholicism, they immediately go to church and they pray. And I mean, there is a great thing about praying. It lets your intentions be known. It organizes your thoughts. It taps into an entire network of faith and, I would almost say, incantations that are already in place to help you out. Praying to certain saints, if that's what you do, in your branch of Catholicism, or you confess, or, whatever thing you do in your faith that aids your faith, it's there for a reason. I'm not saying go outside of your faith, but I am saying definitely keep an open mind that the possibility, if you're having apparition issues, might be you. It might not actually be an apparition. You might, need to go see a therapist or a doctor. Always go see a doctor if you're having problems. At least rule out that you're not having a physical problem. Don't sit there and wonder. It's like women who have sex unprotected and then don't get a pregnancy test because they don't want to know. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Go to the doctor. Eliminate the issue, at least in that category. Write down a list of possibilities and go research them and cross them off the list. No, it's not this. No, it's not that. We do this in the community all the time. Always question what's going on and look at it from multiple sides if you can. Document. Make a diary, even if it's something that you have to do electronic. Um, I have my own issues with things like apparitions, and I mean, sometimes this only happens when I'm asleep. You know, that means a certain thing. Seeing things with the naked eye is a certain thing. Overall feelings, you know, if you just have a feeling like you shouldn't be in a place and you're getting a headache, you know, hindsight is 2020. Never ever ignore your feelings. They can save you. That's what they're there for. Um, I can't tell you, you know, how many people have said to me, you know what, you know, such and such, you know, finally went to jail, and oh my gosh, you know, my mother almost got picked up by him one time, and it's like, you just know inside. Don't ever ignore your feelings. This happens with little kids. You know, they're so close to the veil, and they're so in tune and so sensitive when they say things. You make note of it and see what happens. And just, you know, try not to over dramatize it. Don't give them any fuel, and just give them a boundary. So say, hey, you know, if this scares you, then tell it to back off. You know, don't ever feed into fear. That's not helpful. The whole, you know, oh, I'm afraid of something, I'm gonna bring up the sheet and hide. Don't ever do that. Um, you know, if your kid is afraid of the boogeyman or the closet monster, you know, I remember one of my friends was Asian, and she said, you know, Mommy, I had a bad dream, and her mom rolled over and said, go in there and face your fear. And she was like, I don't wanna, and it's like, you're Japanese, get in there. And I was just like, oh, that's harsh, but that's what really needs to happen. Never give anything an inch, not one. Because the more inches you give it, the more power you give it, the more fear you give it, the more of a problem it becomes. And really, you could be chasing your own tail. So, and I'm sorry this video isn't really giving a whole lot of actual factual information, but this is sort of like my lead into. I am going to talk about like Shields 101, cyballs and energy constructs, and more advanced spellcrafting with energy constructs will be an entire video all on its own. Advanced shielding, advanced defense and offense. And when I say this, I'm not talking about like what you would probably see on something like, gosh, what, like anything anime related. Let's just say that. Anything, you know, anything you've seen on anime, you know, like Dragon Ball Z. No, this is no. This is not what energy work is about. You know, things like maintaining a link, making a link, breaking a link. Energetic links, we make them all the time and we don't really realize it. And then, you know, we have a falling out with friends, and you know, we're still thinking about them, we're still having trouble getting over them, things like that. These are all things that are coming up in the next few videos. But the first things I'm going to address are seeing energy, exercises for seeing energy, seeing the energy of living things, and the layers. I haven't had a whole lot of people talk about the layers of an aura. You know, I've been at school and people have stopped me and said, hey, you know, like, we heard that you could see aura, like, can you read me? And, you know, I'm sitting there in a lab coat and I'm holding all these towels and going, and you want me to look at you? And look at you. I'm not just looking at you with my eyes. I'm looking at you critically. And to see the haze that you first get, it's almost like a cake. You know, there's frosting, and then there's cake, and then there are layers. Sort of like Shrek and the onion philosophy. You know, ogres have layers. People have layers. And at a certain point, I'll get in and I'll see there's a slew of what looks like rainbow throw up top ramen. And I'm like, ugh. And people are like, what? And it's like, well, I've gone as far as I can go. And they're like, but you haven't said anything. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm like, you know, you got some blue here and some purple here, and, you know, it looks like you might be having trouble with your liver because you have turquoise and black spots in your liver. Are you a drinker? And they're like, whoa! And I'm like, big surprise, guys, come on. You know, there's layers of the human aura, and then there's layers in the energy in the body. And no one really talks about that because I guess they don't see past the human aura. I guess that they think that's good enough, and that isn't for me. So I'm gonna have to go give you like an entire video on that and the layers and layers of the human body and the etheric body and connection to things like the astral plane and planes above that, dimensions, paradigms, all that stuff. And if you're looking at this video and you're having, you know, a minuscule trouble because you're having troubleshooting issues with energy, we'll get to that. But I want to be more specific about the things that are getting ready to be talked about. What else can I mention? All of this is linked together. You know, if you're having one trouble, you're probably having trouble in a couple of areas. If you're saying, I can't see energy, but I can hear it and I can feel it, well, are you having a problem with your third eye? I mean, when I answer a question for someone, there are other things I have to be knowledgeable on. And so when I see someone who's asking me a really simple question because they're having what they think is a simple problem, there's so much more. You know, if you're having an area in your life that's causing fear, that has an issue. If you're having something that's causing disability, a disability to handle something, if you're unable to walk away from something, you're realizing it's causing an obsession in your life. You know, there are issues that you can work on that might not feel like they're related at all to the problem that you have. And that's really what I'm trying to get across. And I'm sorry if this isn't coming across as great as it could. This video isn't too structured. But this is more for discussion, the discussion for the layman. You know, the person that had a tiny, you know, dipped their toe in to the water that happens to be the energetic field and gone, oh my God, you know, I'm totally freaked out about this. What do I do? Well, this is the video for you. Is that there's so much more out there than what you're dealing with. You need to broaden your scope. And when I give you information about something that you feel is completely unrelated, bear with me. Bear with me. There are things that are going to come up in the future that I'm going to be talking about in regard to the subject. Stay tuned.